And since you're all here and engaged in this sort of inquiry and listening to this sort of lecture, I assume that you're all on the process of waking up. Or else you're teasing yourselves with some kind of flirtation with waking up.
I am your father. I'm Batman.
I'm Spartacus!
Bond. James Bond.
Hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Goonies never say die! You're killing me, Smalls!
I see dead people.
That the power of Christ compels you!
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
Hello, and welcome to the Cinephellas podcast. That's right, Cinephellas, the only place where this one time at band camp, everyone got rich from GameStop, but I lost $500 in Blockbuster. For the Cinephellas, I'm Nile Fortner. I haven't seen you in a while, and you're looking really good. I really like that shirt, by the way, and I hope you've been watching and catching up on some great movies and TV shows. Seriously, by the end of episode 5, WandaVision had me mind blown. You and I have been friends for a while now, and I'm sure you already know that I'm a big comic book fan. Seriously, I just suggested the comic book Philadelphia to someone just a few days ago, which is why I'm excited to share with you a new up-and-coming comic book and streaming company called Pop Cultivator. The Chicago-based comic company has comics for both adults and kids. They offer original characters, apparel, custom apps, and they are licensing their characters to create films, games, and collectibles. On this episode of the Cinephellas podcast, we have Chief Creative and Executive Officer Josh Blaylock of Pop Cultivator. On this episode, Josh discusses with me the team's comic book industry experience, comic book stories from the Pop Cultivator, and a lot more on this podcast episode. So, if that sounds interesting to you, then let's get into it.
Life is good, but it can be better.
Murray, one small thing.
Yeah.
When you bring me out, can you introduce me as Joker?
Like, how did you get into the comic book industry? Because you've been in it for, like, from what I'm understanding, 20 years, right?
Yeah, actually, this year is the 20th anniversary of Devil's Due Comics' first release, which is even predates G.I. Joe through Image. It was a little black and white book called Misplaced. And before that, I was self-publishing with a company name called Labyrinth Studios right out of high school. So going back to 96, I just, I kind of like don't remember a time that I didn't want to write and draw like for a living, and somehow that was a concept, like that's just what I want to do when I grow up, from before I had the concept of like what a job really was. And then I just, as a teenager, I'd go to anywhere I could and talk to anyone who was making a living making comics or reading, interviews and articles, and I was just the perfect age for when the Image guys all left Marvel to start Image, and I was read 2 Disney biographies, in middle school, and just always a sucker for any story like that. So on the business side, I got into that just out of impatience and necessity.
Okay.
And a lack of options. So people, I just wanted to be in the industry so bad, and started learning how the distribution worked and how publishing worked. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I should go back a little bit. By, less than a year after high school, I was self-publishing a comic book series and going to little conventions around the country, which there weren't nearly like cons like there are now, but there weren't nearly as many, big cons as there are now. and went to a couple of years of art school because there really was no education you could get from the comic book industry. And I got my graphic design portfolio in order and landed a job eventually after bouncing around a little bit, being the art director for a t-shirt company, where I ended up getting to be the art director at like 21 years old, not really knowing what I was doing, and helping to launch this retro 80s cartoon pop culture line called Old School. And it was the first time anyone had really brought back, G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, Voltron, Thundercats, all that stuff into stores. I mean, like we got it into Hot Topic and back in the day, Gadzooks, all those, hot, trendy mall retail outlets at the time. So this is, you're looking at like, I think 98 or 99.
Right.
And that's how I learned about licensing. And as amazing of a job as that was, especially for someone so young, I was completely miserable because it wasn't comics. I was just obsessed with comics. Mm-hmm. And so I left this cool job to work on my graphic design clientele and to build up my graphic design clientele, thinking I'm going to self-publish comics for who knows how many more years and slowly build up a following. And instead, I ended up taking what I learned from that job, getting the G.I. Joe license from Hasbro, and then doing a deal with Image Comics to publish it through them. And that sort of was, that was it. That put me on the map. That was a huge hit. That kicked off the entire wave of 80s retro pop culture cartoon stuff in comics, just like we had done with, T-shirts and apparel and the couple of years before. Yeah, and then so I was next thing I know, I've got a company, with building up with employees and everything else, and we published G.I. Joe for like 7 years, and a whole bunch of other stuff too.
Nice. So are you really attracted to those 80s type characters and stories mostly?
The grand irony of all of it is when it launched, everyone, we were the kids that came out of nowhere. I was this nobody that, in the industry, and suddenly I was, had one of the top books in the country, and then our whole studio was kind of seen as this fad. And the whole time I was thinking, like, I'm just doing this 80s stuff because I genuinely love it, and I can't believe that no one understands how popular this stuff is. But I don't know how long this is going to last. We also, I was doing all of my own original stuff too. So was everyone that worked with us. And I was like, I don't know how long this is going to last. We need to, diversify and build up out of the 80s theme. And here we are 20 years later. and like 80s retro has never been more popular. It's just still, the retro now, it's been longer since it was a retro thing, originally than it actually was between the time of when we launched the stuff. It had only been the stuff had only been gone for, around a decade when it took off again. And, because it kind of, the 80s stuff really went into the early 90s and then died out, and we brought it back in the early 2000s. Here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
double that amount of time, and it's still like super hot.
So how did the idea for Pop Cultivator happen, and like when did you get into that, and what steps did you take to get that up and running?
Well, Pop Cultivator came about, I've had this idea for almost 10 years, because I've always, we've always embraced crowdfunding technology, and we've interwoven Kickstarter, that type of crowdfunding into our traditional publishing model. And I just, thought this was just makes so much sense that the natural evolution of a fan-based entertainment industry like this, that when you want to raise capital to do new projects, why not tap into the fan base to do that? Because you're not just getting investors, you're also getting supporters, and you're getting marketing evangelists I mean, you're just getting so much benefit out of that. And the only reason we didn't do this years ago was because it was not legal. The laws had to catch up with modern crowdfunding technology. And
yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, the first. I mean, really, if you go back and look at it, I had actually even forgotten about this. I always tell this story about how I had no money after paying for the G.I. Joe license, and Image created a convention preview book, and that's how we made cash to get by until the book came out. But I actually had forgotten about the fact that I crowdfunded sort of manually before that. I took subscriptions on a really archaic website and manually kept track of them on a notepad and a Excel spreadsheet. And then and then once the books came out, for those first 4 issues we shipped, I had carried those to the post office and everything. So I've been involved in crowdfunding since day one. And so there's just on technology side, and the ease with which you can do it was one thing that had to happen first. And then the laws had to catch up because we had these outdated laws from the 1930s, post-Depression era, and it kept people under a very high net worth from being allowed to invest in startup companies. So there's protections in place now. You're only allowed to invest a certain amount of your income, and it's all registered with the SEC, and that's good. That's all ready to go. They actually just increased the amount you're allowed to raise from $1 million to $5 million, and that's going to kind of become the way. And as far as but more into like why I like the idea so much is publishing has been really evolving, and the whole comics industry has been growing in all sorts of different areas, taking all sorts of different pathways. The medium, like what I care about, I'm a creator and a writer and an artist, and I like to make comic book content. And the whole previous 50 years of how it was done is just that was the means to get the comic book content out, printing books, getting them out to all the comic shops and bookstores. And now there's other ways to get that comic book content out. You can just kickstart it and get it out directly to fans, and some people are making really good money that way. And it's able to break in new talent that wouldn't be able to support, doing such a thing any other way. And then we're also seeing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of kids coming in, just reading comics on Webtoons and other online comics, and getting into them that way. And then they want to go to Comic-Cons and sort of party, thinking of it more like the way that you view a music festival, where it's more about a community engagement, and then you just buy a bunch of stuff when you're there at the event. And there's people that are making a big part of their revenue through the conventions, and it's just all these different channels have popped up now, and different. Meanwhile, the oldest channel of all, the bookstore market, is just crushing it right now. It's doing fantastic. So there's all these different pathways to get your comic content out there now. So taking the crowdfunding, taking an excited fan base that wants to be part of this, and just saying, look, what if we have this fund and we put the right team together so that we are we know a deep expertise on the publishing, on actually making the apparel and making the toys, on holding events, everything, and say, okay, let's get so sort of like getting the executive team together, getting the core management team together, but also let's get our team of investors together, which are hundreds and hopefully thousands of our fans,
right?
Exactly. And let's just go do some cool shit. And it's like, so it's, but that way it gives us a big liberty to take advantage of all the disruption happening now, and say, what's the best pathway for this individual property. So many different kinds of comics and so many different genres, and they all, can be served by approaching the market a different way.
It's funny because you mentioned the comics, and now I'm thinking, do you think the pandemic plays into more people reading comics now?
It does, for sure. And so that long answer I gave before was sort of building up to like that stuff that was already happening.
Right.
It was already going that way. But there was some resistance. There was some stigma with crowdfunding just in people's heads that didn't really have any legitimate reason other than it's just a new weird thing. And that was being chipped away. And then once COVID hit and the lockdowns hit, that stuff, that just went away overnight. I mean, it just, now you've got, Keanu Reeves raising $3 million or no, raising, not 3 million, but raising over $1 million to do comics. Mm-hmm. We've got, different celebrities getting into the game now, and we've got digital, NFT, non-fungible tokens, cryptocurrency art, which is limited edition. That's going to play into the collectability of all of this stuff. COVID just seemed to blow down all of the any barriers that were left on this. And when we were all really concerned when the lockdowns first happened, because there was a lot that spiraled out of that, sort of just not even as much from the actual customer response to things, but the corporate response out of fears of what might happen. And AT&T really shook up DC Comics, and then the whole distribution situation that affects every comic book shop in North America I forget how I started that sentence there. Really got shook up with Diamond, with DC Comics leaving Diamond. And it was really kind of nervous there for a while. I shut down with my publishing company, Double Do. I even shut down printing on a lot of books for a couple of months. It ended up stores ended up having great sales. I know several stores that had their best, some of their best retail, their best Christmas seasons ever this year. Kids sales, the whole graphic novel category is up. Kids sales are, I think, up 30%, if I'm right, from the year before. And I just saw a thing this morning that said adult graphic novels are up 110%.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and just people, part of it is people getting connected. Part of it's people just being bored, and they're and also they can't go to cons to get their fix of their their comic fandom fix, and they're just buying more comics. I think something's happening on a deeper level too, where we've all been forced to spend a lot more time at home, and if when you get sort of like as you get older, you get away from your some of the deeper level of your passion for collecting or for enjoying certain things, just because you're busy and life's moving along. I think there's a little bit of that deeper connection happening again, just because people have been forced to sit around and kind of like reconnect with some of their older, geeky hobbies, and they're remembering the passion they had for that, and that might actually stick around, even when things open back up and everyone's getting busy again. It's like, because we all had a little reminder, like, oh yeah, this really helped carry me through that dark time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know that feeling, yeah. And when it comes to Pop Cultivator, what story or even character would you recommend to someone that you think has the ability to either be the most popular or interesting?
So we are in the process right now of getting ready to lock in and announce the different projects we'll be developing first. And literally until the past week or two, that a lot of that's been contingent on how much we've raised, and it's how much we raise from here on out, which this round is going until the end of April, affects how many more we can add to it. But we have a range, so I don't have any specific ones to really drop yet, but I can pretty safely talk about a few of them. I should say too, we have a range of books from skewing for very young all the way up to adult action, sci-fi, horror. We want to do everything. So on the younger front, we have a book. Working title right now is Ruby DIY by Jose Garibaldi, who's been one of the key colorists on Dogman and Captain Underpants for something like 7 or 8 years now, and been involved in all of those books, which are the best-selling comics in the world right now. Over 100 million of those sold. And he also worked on the Captain Underpants animated series as a designer, has worked on the Ninja Turtles animated series, and he's one of our core founding team members, and he's working on that and another project to follow that called History is Written by Victor for middle grade to young adult audiences, and really excited about those. People who have invested have seen some sneak peeks of that character, and you can see that on the Pop Cultivator page on WeFunder. And then there's a couple of my titles that fantasy, sci-fi that have been in development for a long time that actually have already started coming out that we're probably going to be bringing into Pop Cultivator's ownership. That's Ark World and the Encoded. One is a sort of an ancient Atlantis, lost advanced civilization on Earth. Kind of call it Ancient Aliens without the aliens. Okay. It's just about us being here longer. Mm-hmm. There might be some aliens, we'll see. And then there's the Encoded, which is takes place in the year 2055, a sci-fi comic about sort of like what if John Connor and the Rebels, or what if Neo and were actually not the heroes. The AI wasn't necessarily the bad guy. Mm-hmm. It was more just ambivalent and taken out by these zealots, and then that created the problem because these machines had to defend themselves. So we're that actually is taken off with collectors. It's last week the first issue came out, and everyone's scrambling for this one cover by this artist Joel Herrera. So I want to kind of want to bring those over in a good faith gesture into Pop Cultivator. And there is I can say there's 3 more kids properties we may be greenlighting, and there's a lot of people that want to bring in their submissions right now, and we're kind of holding things back there. But yeah, it's what we're doing with Pop Cultivator is it's a new kind of company, truly born out of this current era of disruption. It's not a business that is trying to reverse engineer itself and change itself to fit into all of the different things that are happening now. It's solving a problem that creators have, and it's solving problems that publishers have. On the creative side, it's saying like, look, here's a fund, here's a management team that knows every aspect of not only of getting a comic book out there in the publishing world, but also anything that could possibly happen to it afterwards, from the merchandising to the films and TV, to partnering with conventions. I mean, it's not just some agent that wants to take a cut of what you make. Yeah. So we can fund it, incubate it, nurture it, and truly help manage that property. Of course, we do take a piece of the whole of the ownership, because that's how we have to make our money there, and we understand if someone doesn't want to give that up. But that's the challenge artists have right now. They have a lot of options now to maintain ownership of their properties, but they still don't want to do everything themselves, and it is so much work to do all that. And that's where we already have the systems in place. We already, we'll have the money, and we'll have the ability, with just the knowledge and experience to manage that. On the publisher side, they know that creators have more options now, and so publishers for a long time had this really sweet arrangement where creators would just bring them content, and they could do these creator-owned books, put them out, license some of the media options for a while and hopefully make something happen there. And if it didn't, they still, covered all the costs and made good money that way. And that's just getting harder for them to mine that field, because truly the creators just really need the publishers for the distribution now, and for some of them and a lot of the marketing and everything, or they do need them for the money. So a lot of comic publishers don't. They only have so much to put into funding new risky concepts, because to them it's risky because they don't have time to sit there and focus on all of them. And we're coming to the publishers with saying, like, look, boom, here's a property ready to go. We're funding the creation of it. We're handling the story editing on everything, and we have a whole team behind us that knows what we're doing. That the certainty and the reliability of that for a publisher means a lot, and the publishers will be very willing to, they are being very willing to, renegotiate a lot of their standard boilerplate deals to give us a better deal than that creator would ever get on their own, because they know we're coming to the table with it. So it's and I can do that because I am a publisher and I am a creator, and I understand, and I know what all the other deals are, what other standard deals are with all the other publishers in the industry and what they offer talent. So this is a new concept that, from its core was developed, to be a win-win for everybody, and the fans own a piece of it. So the fan ownership is like a check and a balance, versus on the whole concept, as opposed to if, just some financial firm came in and, threw a bunch of money into it because they're hoping to cash out on the movie someday.
Right.
If we don't handle that right, or we, we're not offering fair deals to the creators, or we're, dropping the ball delivering to publishers, we're going to have a lot of people to answer to on the shareholder side. And but at the same time, it's not a situation of just like shareholders in, Marvel stock or Disney stock, where, they don't care either, because they're just going on E-Trade and buying stocks. It's this is truly, fans that are investing in the properties. And just and I could ramble on about it for a long time, but there's so many cool things about it. We've got Alma Silva on our team, who's going to be, a direct investor community manager, because that's a thing now that we can have. We can have this robust engagement with all of our investor community, because they actually are into what we're doing, and that doesn't happen in a publicly traded company. Other than you can have Elon Musk tweeting, or people excited about Richard Branson or something, and so they invest in some Virgin companies. But you really don't get that in a bigger IPO.
And that's one thing I noticed too with Pop Cultivator. They have all these people. Like, I was looking at the names you all have. I see people from like South Park. You mentioned Captain Underpants and Lucasfilm. So it's like, how can I put this? Like over like a century of comic experience, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that's why one of the key people I brought in, first people I called about this, was Mike Horn from Palisades. And Mike started the company that really helped pioneer in that, the whole like new system upgrade to action figures, in the collector market. We all give, Todd McFarlane is unquestionably the guy that started that whole trend. But Palisades really came in there and did some fantastic toys, some really innovative stuff. They did the Muppets toys. They did have a South Park license. They did the Invader Zim toy line way back on the very first iteration of Invader Zim on Nickelodeon. They did a lot of video games like Resident Evil, and I mean, you're talking about developing those toys from scratch, getting the licenses with all those partners, and seeing it all the way to completion from manufacturing the toys in China, getting them over here and getting them into, Toys R Us at the time, Target, wherever they, all these big box retailers. And also doing high-end sculptures like the G.I. Joe, sculptures, and understanding what is necessary for those small limited edition runs that are going to go just to the comic shops to a couple hundred fans. And since then, Mike, he's partnered with Lucasfilm, NFL. He did a lot of making high-end limited run items for I'm totally blanking out on one of the biggest video games in the world. He did loot crates for was it Borderlands maybe, that they sold to as part of the promoting the game. And then that's Jose Garibaldi, I mentioned, just rattling off like a tiny fraction of some of the brands he's worked on, literally designing characters. Like that guy actually designed that new Casey Jones that was in the CGI series that went in for several years recently. Mm-hmm. He made the new Casey Jones. I think he designed that new Baxter Stockman, the Mousers, Ice Cream Kitty. Those are all his. And he's worked on Lego Movie 2, Unikitty, the crazy like cyborg looking morphing cat in that one. They made her all badass. So Sean DePasquale is on our team. He's worked closely with. He was managing a whole comedy site and podcast for Macaulay Culkin recently. He's worked with Seth Green and Matt Senreich. He's worked on behind the scenes on several TV shows. So I could name drop it all day, and it's like it isn't just name dropping though. It is to say like, look, that we through our team we know everyone and have kind of done a little bit of everything, and that's not even getting to our advisor list. The advisor list is kind of there just to sort of show who we're connected to and who we're friends with there, and it's so because hey, at the end of the day, I do realize we are asking for investors to come in and throw in cash just for the simple concept of like, hey, let's make some really cool comic shit and try to make it happen. Right. And that could be 5 people you met at the bar who decide to start a company. It's the same concept. But that's who's on the team, and so you do something you're passionate about. There's no guarantee of success. But if you do something that's just superficial for the money, you're almost definitely not going to be successful at it. You have to be willing to do the stuff you really care about and keep doing it until one of them actually hits.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All right, Josh, still, honestly, those are the questions that I have for you. It was really cool to speak with you. So would you like to let us know where we can find you on social media?
Yeah, Twitter, I'm at Josh Blaylock, and TikTok, Blaylock Comics.
Well, look at you. You made it all the way to the end of this podcast episode, which means you love us just as much as we love you. We would also really love if you would head on over to Cinephellas.com, because over there we have movie reviews, news, more podcast episodes like this one, and a lot more. You may also check out the Cinefellas on YouTube. We have a lot of cool stuff coming your way. The rest of the fellows and I will continue to discuss all kinds of movies, news, and television shows. We always have a lot of fun conversations and topics that we'd love for you to check out. And you're probably on your phone or looking at some sort of screen anyways, so you might as well use it to stay updated with us and follow Cinefellas on social media such as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Feel free to share, comment, tag us, tell us what you're watching, and be a part of the Cinefellas family. We at Cinefellas really do appreciate all your support. John seems really cool, and I'm glad we got to connect. I'm definitely going to check out their stuff as well. But until then, it's time for me to head on out and actually watch some movies. I'm going to check out Malcolm and Marie on Netflix, and Judas and the Black Messiah I feel like is going to be awesome. Next time I see you, I'll tell you more about those movies, and some other ones as well. For the Cinephellas, I'm Nile Fortner, and remember, this is Knucking Futz. It's hilarious, but now, say it in Spanish.
Why so serious?
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
Well, nobody's perfect.
Go ahead. Make my day.
E.T. Phone home.
There's no place like home.
Hasta la vista, baby.